everyone. Dale here with the programming committee moderating today, and we welcome Daniel Curtis. Daniel, how are you doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Awesome. Today we're going to learn about, if you don't have Wi-Fi in your home in 2022, I kind of envy you because it's the thing that we need and love, but it kind of, when it doesn't work correctly, it can be really frustrating, right? So today we're gonna speak with and learn from Daniel Curtis. He's the owner of Osterville Wi-Fi and Smart Home. Daniel, you've been dealing with Wi-Fi and home tech, smart home technology for a long time, over 20 years. You've got a company operating obviously out of Osterville, but focusing on Cape and Islands. This is kind of a cool topic because we have a cord cutting coffee Q&A coming up soon. And hopefully, fingers crossed, I don't want to put Open Cape on the hook, but they're doing a lot with fiber on the Cape, and they're involved with some things happening on Cape as well that we're hopefully going to have another Q&A later this spring about. But today we're going to cross some paths between Wi-Fi in our home, getting Wi-Fi maybe to an exterior building, a garage, or I don't know what we call them, an accessory building. I've got a cottage out back I'm dying to ask you a million questions about. But we'll touch a little bit on alternatives for internet and maybe some 5G, maybe internet streaming services, kind of the whole bundle in the smart home audio video. So Daniel, I'm going to turn it over to you. And folks, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on it. And without further ado, Daniel, let's go.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to show some interest in my company and kind of what we're all about, what we're trying to do. It is very much appreciated. So I'll tell a little bit about myself, but I won't try to bore you. So as Dale said, I've been working on the Cape and Islands in the home electronics industry for about 20 years now. Mostly higher end stuff, kind of the multi-million-dollar homes here on the Cape, Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard. Really got a chance to work for a lot of different companies here on the Cape before I started doing this on my own. Tried to take away the good things that I learned from those companies and the good practices and apply those to my own business here. What we really concentrate on is end user experience and overall customer ease of use for our systems. Over the years, I just saw so many systems being sold that were so difficult for people to use, whether it was audio, video, Wi-Fi, just kind of, the smart connectivity. A lot of companies just selling them, really expensive, fancy, home automation stuff when they, and the challenge is just keeping that stuff reliable. So that's really what we're focused on, is ease of use and reliability of really home electronics across the board. But what we're really focused on is home Wi-Fi. And with the newer technology, it really in the home Wi-Fi market of mesh Wi-Fi systems. We've really been able to, test those products in a real world scenario. We went through a few different manufacturers before we landed on the one that we use now. And what we use this technology for is primarily solving a problem for people, which is expanding their Wi-Fi coverage. So that is, what a lot of people may not know is that, when Comcast comes and they, here on the Cape, all we have is Comcast right now for, high speed residential Wi-Fi. Open Cape, as Dale mentioned, is also doing stuff, but I think a little with fiber, but a little bit more, I think, on the commercial side and light residential and some apartment complexes. But most of us here at home are, on the Cape are using our Comcast internet connection. So, what Comcast typically gives you is one of their modem router combo units. And what a lot of people don't know is that those units can generally broadcast between 700 and 1,500 square feet, taking into consideration the obstructions in the home. And these can be, brick fireplaces, or if you have a historic home, heavier construction, if you have spray foam walls, more concrete in your home, more brick in your home. So, a lot of people, they have larger homes, 3, 4, 5, 6,000 square foot homes here on the Cape, and they need something to be able to broadcast that signal everywhere in the home, and have a strong, fast, reliable signal. So in the past, this was done with a series of what's called access points. So you'd have these hardwired access points all over this large home, which was multiple points of Wi-Fi broadcast, throughout the home, which is good. But you needed to have the hard wiring there, which is difficult for homes that, where they're higher end homes. You don't want to make a bunch of holes and run wires and walls and patch walls and all of that. So this mesh Wi-Fi technology, which has really kind of hit the market in the past 5 years, which is about when we started the business, it has been really wonderful because it can work with hard wiring in the home and be connected that way, or it can be connected in a completely wireless scenario where you're essentially just plugging these things into wall outlets and configuring them in a completely wireless format. Or it can be just a combination. Let's say you have some hard wiring in some places, no hard wiring in the other. So it's a very flexible system. So we're able to apply that to pretty much every home, regardless of the hardwiring infrastructure in that home. And that's been a really great way to sell these systems. We've kind of packaged priced them. So, if somebody calls, we look on Zillow, we find the square footage of their home, and we were able to give them a quote right over the phone of what that's going to cost to cover that square footage. And some of these people have like a large pool area out back, or a pool house they'd like to cover, maybe a tennis court, maybe a boat dock, maybe a guest cottage, a barn, you name it. We can cover that with Wi-Fi, and we have a couple different ways to do it. But what we found from these mesh points is we can put them on the exterior wall of one building and the exterior wall of that separate building, and generally get about 150 to 200 foot wireless connection, kind of a send and receive, so that that hard wiring doesn't actually have to be ran between buildings, which was in the past you'd have to dig up your yard, put a conduit down, run that wire through the conduit from building to building to get that wireless connection. But we've been, really doing a lot with, point to point wireless to cover, outbuildings or separate buildings like Dale had mentioned. Besides for that, we do,
Daniel, can I pause
sure,
just one
sorry.
second? Someone, I just want to bring it up. Eileen, I need new glasses, so I have to look here. The Zoom text is real small. When you go to sharing your website, I'll remind you, but do you have an image of a mesh point that you could show us? There's a couple questions about what it is, or is there something you could portray graphically for those who aren't following, or maybe illustrate it a little bit more?
I wish I kind of ran down to my shop and grabbed one before the meeting, but essentially I can paint you a real easy picture. What these look like is like a white, it most typically would be like a white can of soda. So if these are usually white, they plug into power, they have an Ethernet port on them if you want to hardwire them, but they're about the size and shape, the ones we use, of a can of soda. which is nice because we can usually plug these in and place them behind furniture, behind drapery, maybe in the corner behind a nightstand of a bed, or mount them up high in somebody's basement, if they have an open basement. So they're really not, they're pretty pleasant to look at, versus, you may have seen some of those Wi-Fi routers that look like they're a spaceship from Star Wars or something like that. It's with a million lights on them and all of that. So it's not really, there's a certain, because these things, the manufacturers of them know that they'll be placed around people's homes. So they try to go for a little bit more of a, nicer fit and finish, a little more contemporary fit and finish to these things.
Okay. So I think what you're saying is you want to put them in 2 points close to each other, and they each kind of go like 50 feet and sort of meet in the middle and carry that signal over, like carrying a baton. Is that the concept of this?
Yeah, well, the concept really is so what we want to do is, kind of along the lines of making it everything as easy and reliable as possible. All of these are just one Wi-Fi name, one Wi-Fi password. Okay, and then that gets expanded to cover the footage. But 50 feet isn't really, that's pretty much on point. 50, 70 feet away from each other is what we found. Now, the process we do is half of it is installing these things in the home on a typical installation, and the other half is running speed tests all over the home. So these units usually get moved a couple times during the installation phase, so that we can get around obstructions like fireplaces and that sort of thing, and make sure that for example, if somebody has a home office, that we are running plenty of speed tests in the home office to make sure, or the workspaces people use to that unit, that mesh Wi-Fi unit may get moved a couple times around that home office until we can sort of get the most speed and the best performance out of that unit. So there's a certain science to what we do that we've sort of figured out along the way with these systems, but just getting back to the point that it could be 50 feet, it could be 70 feet, could be 30 feet away from each other, just based on the construction materials of the home and the tests that we do on these units.
Yeah, I noticed. So my house is built in 49, and I've got like 19 layers of flooring,
Yeah.
and a chimney, and 25 layers of paint and linoleum on the walls. I don't live in a 3,000 square foot home, but I think it's still like $1 million here on Cape.
Yeah.
And I notice I've tried moving my router around, and Michael Kemp has a question. The mesh points, they still have a degradation in strength, like over distance, like just like our regular router that we're used to having? Or is
Yes.
do they know how to combat that better than like a Comcast router?
That's an excellent question. So one thing people should keep in mind, and that a lot of people don't really, they may know it, but they don't really grasp it too well sometimes, is that so speed and distance are completely relative to each other with a point of Wi-Fi broadcast, like a Wi-Fi router. Okay, so as if you run a wireless speed test right next to your router, you're going to be pretty close to the speeds you subscribe to from your internet service provider, right? But as you move away and you keep running those speed tests, you're going to see that speed gradually decline over the distance that you move away from that unit. You'll also see those little Wi-Fi kind of triangle, upside down triangle bars. You'll see those decrease as you move farther away too. So that speed is all concentrated at that single point of Wi-Fi broadcast in most pieces is that router. So the mesh Wi-Fi systems, they're multi-point Wi-Fi broadcasts. So what happens is, as you move away from one point of Wi-Fi broadcast, you're moving to the other side of the house, another Wi-Fi broadcast picks up, and that one is delivering now a stronger signal that also has a higher concentration of speed. So what we're looking to
Okay.
do with these systems is provide generally even distribution of speed and broadcast strength, so that these devices stay connected. And to that point, there's another kind of technology that's been really beneficial to these systems, and that's called seamless roaming, is the name of that. And that is that transition, that fast transition from point to point. So as your phone, or whatever device you're using realizes that the Wi-Fi signal is stronger, now that you're walking to the other side of the house and you connect to that other point, it's within I think it's like 100 milliseconds or something that it can make that transition, so that even if you're on a Zoom call or a FaceTime call talking to somebody walking through your home, you might just see the slightest little bit of blur, or or a little bit of jitter, but it's so fast, it's so quick from point to point, and therefore you're not essentially losing your Wi-Fi connection, as as it hands off from one unit to the next unit. It's very, very fast, that transition. So I hope that answered the
Yeah, that
question.
does help. And the mesh points or even the routers, they talk about, and you mentioned this too, they cover square footage. Do we have to go back to geometry class and figure out pi like in a circle? Like, so 7,500 square feet is that like three-dimensional? Is that like I start here and I'm covering 750 square feet like all around me? Or is it, you know what I'm saying? Like, how does somebody know, like, what does that number mean? Is it, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yes. So we have a very basic formula that we've kind of discovered working with these over the past 5 years, is really, one point, one mesh point per 1,000 square feet is the usual formula we use.
Okay. Of
And
floor space? So like length
yeah,
times width?
of overall square footage in the home. So
Okay, gotcha.
so if somebody calls and they say, oh, my Wi-Fi is terrible, I've got dead spots in the guest bedroom, I've got slow Wi-Fi down in the in the basement office, it's great in the living room, which is where my router is, but can you guys help me? Then one of the questions I ask is, okay, can you please give me the address of the home? So then while I'm on the phone with them, I look that address up on Zillow, which Zillow usually gives you the square footage of the home. I ask them a couple questions like, do you have a finished basement living space? The other thing about Zillow too is if you have it set up in the satellite view, you can get that aerial view of the home. So you can see if they have a pool, if they have a guest house, as well as the configuration of the home. Is it a long home? Is it a long L-shaped home, which is not Wi-Fi friendly, or is it a house that's just vertical, floor upon floor upon floor with an A-frame? That's very typically an easier house for Wi-Fi broadcast. So, based on what I see, I can give a price right over the phone. And, from just a business standpoint, if they, if what I spec at 1 per 1,000 square feet, if they need more than that, let's say they need an extra mesh point, we don't charge them extra for that. It's just, we give a price over the phone, we stick to the price. So, or if it requires less because, for some reason, the variables involved, such as, building materials and whatever else isn't such a factor as we anticipated, then they only get charged for, how many mesh points we used in that system. So I hope that helped answer.
Yeah,
the
that
question.
does help.
Okay.
I've got another question, but we've got one here from Eileen and Edward. What's the sequence of the connections? Is it the first? Is it the mesh? Is it the router? You get your router set up and then the mesh goes off of the router, or does the mesh kind of replace a router? Or maybe it's different by manufacturer. I don't know.
No, that's an excellent question, and I'm very happy to answer these. And people can, if I get too technical, stop me.
Okay.
But so when we started doing these, we would actually, we log into the Comcast router and we would turn off its routing functionality, and we would just restrict that unit to just a modem. We would then use our first mesh Wi-Fi point as the router in that system to replace replace the Comcast modem/router units routing capabilities. Then the other mesh points around this router, those are all, it all works as a system. It's sold as a system, it's designed as a system, and so they all communicate. The mesh points like a direct connection, or they prefer a direct connection to that main unit, or there's always a main mesh point, whether it's a router or what's called access point mode. So they prefer a direct connection to that first unit that's hardwired into the router. But if the system sees that connection is too far away, they'll go to the next closest mesh Wi-Fi point. Illustrating that point would be like, if you have a really long house, and you have this one that's connected to the router, you have, your second one, and then you have your third one. That third one is going to, if it doesn't have a good enough connection to the main one, it's going to connect to the second one. So, really all of that is kind of going on behind the scenes, in these systems, which makes it a lot easier for us because we don't have to do as much kind of, technical configuring of these things as much as we would have to do in the past with a hardwired system consisting of more access points. There's kind of embedded software in these things that's sort in the system that's sort of constantly correcting itself. And to that point, if one of these, let's say you have a guest, one of these is in the guest house, right? Or the guest room, and so you have a guest and they unplug it so they can plug in their phone charger. Now you have a mesh point down in this system. Well, the system also has a feature called self-healing. So because it's constantly regulating this connection and performance, if one of these goes down, it self-heals, so that farther mesh point will then it'll look around for the next closest mesh point, and it will connect to that, so that you just don't have one half of the house without Wi-Fi.
Cool.
So
is that standard? Is that kind of standard if you buy a mesh system, or is that a brand or a manufacturer that you have adopted because of that reason? Like, is that a standard thing, or is that something you need to be looking out for?
Yeah, it ranges between system to system, and it really, I say this term mesh Wi-Fi system, but all of these systems are actually considerably different from each other. They use the same technology, but they overall, but they use it in different ways. So that's why we actually went through about 6 different systems before we landed on the one that we use now. And just to get back to the one quick point, we now set these things up in what's called an access point mode. So we actually let the Comcast router do the routing. It's still the router, but we disable its Wi-Fi broadcast so that it doesn't compete with our better Wi-Fi network, which not only is better quality and has better hardware to use, but it's also we're able to expand that almost indefinitely. We've done a one home that was like 12,000 square feet with a pool. So we haven't reached the point where where we couldn't cover a home with these systems, which
sounds just like my house, what you're describing right now. Yeah. Not quite. So Eileen has a question here.
Sure.
I just want to, so you're going, it's specifically about your company. you can keep the Comcast router, let it do its thing to work with the network, disabling the Wi-Fi within the home, and then you're bringing in equipment, you're providing equipment that talks to that router and then lets you move around the home and be connected, right? That's essentially what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, in the simplest terms, we're trying to expand the Wi-Fi coverage in the home as best we can, and in the easiest to use and most reliable way possible. And that's the key, because like I was saying, we started doing these in this router mode, but we switched over to this access point mode, letting the Comcast router still do the routing, because it's the same reason we don't change out the modems anymore. We used to install aftermarket modems, from other manufacturers, so people could save that $14 a month on their Comcast bill for the rental charge of the modem. But what we found is that, whether it's intentional or unintentional, the Comcast equipment is just a lot more reliable on a modem connection than aftermarket modems. And we kind of learned that the hard way. But
I had go ahead. I was just gonna say I had a similar experience. I bought an aftermarket modem. It was a decent modem. It was a couple $100s. And I had a problem. My connection was down. I called Comcast, and what do you think they said? We don't support that modem. We only support our own modems. And I noticed, for me, I have to go down and get a modem like every year. My quality goes down. And one of my questions is, without noticing a physical problem, how does someone know if their Wi-Fi is not adequate in the home, degrading? How does someone know, like, if someone's here right now and they're like, geez, I wonder how my Wi-Fi is performing? How can somebody do that and figure out, like, could this be better? Like, how does one?
It's actually really easy from a general standpoint. You can either Google the website Ookla speed test, which is the most common internet speed test, or you can download the app. It's OOKLA, and that will give you a speed test. Most people kind of gauge it off the download side of the connection. It'll give you your download, your upload, and your latency. Most people measure that by the download. So realistically, if you're looking at, in today's world of internet, if you run that speed test and you see anything lower than 50 megabits per second, it's probably, in any room of your house that you're looking to use Wi-Fi, it's probably worth upgrading, because that's what we've found to be the point where, you start to see your smart TV buffer with Netflix, pages are loading slow, where, I think 15 years ago, 50 megabits per second was like, wow, I'm high speed internet, but it's just, keeping up with today's devices, such as smart TVs, 4K video streaming, having a house full of people who need to use, a summer home where you have, 3 or 4 people on Zoom calls. They're actually working from these houses. You have the kids playing online video games, which now are the newer game systems are 8K. Have, people streaming, 4K Netflix. That's a lot of, a lot of demand on a Wi-Fi connection, high bandwidth applications and multiple high bandwidth applications. So, it's a good rule of thumb. If you're seeing 50 megabits per second in any room of your home, you like to have reliable Wi-Fi. That's really the point where you should be, maybe considering, upgrading your hardware to, one of these mesh Wi-Fi systems.
Yep. I notice in my house, I've got 3 kids. I walk in one room, my daughter's on driver's ed Zoom class. She has Netflix going and playing a game on her phone. And I'm like, what are you actually paying attention to right now? I'm a little concerned about this. you go in the
Yeah.
next room and like, it's like the phone's going, this is going. And, you know, so this is like really interesting information that you're giving us today. You mentioned, so 50 megabits Mbps download is good. I remember I lived in Worcester 15 years ago. We had 80, 90 was like standard. So I don't know if that's, you know, welcome to Cape Cod thing or not, but where do you see like where's broadband going? You know, how is it going to affect the Wi-Fi in the home? Like what other options, or where does you see like that overall technology might be going?
Yes, I will jump on that question in one sec. Do you mind if I just share my screen? I
Yeah, of
just want
course.
I want to give a visual, you know, if I can, of just really, yeah, I think it'll help with just kind of the understanding of the mesh Wi-Fi
Great.
system. Let me just, okay, switch. All right, I think let's see. Yeah. So here we have, okay, so this is off our website here, Osterville Wi-Fi and Smart Home. And so, you know, here you have a home with Wi-Fi, you know, a standard, you know, Comcast modem / router unit here. And you can see the little red circle, you know, that's that. And then the bar, you know, the circle's going out in gray. That's that Wi-Fi broadcast in most people's homes. And you can see that the broadcast isn't going as far to you know, cover the whole house and all of the people using Wi-Fi. And essentially, when we install the mesh Wi-Fi system, you know, now you can see those multiple points of Wi-Fi broadcast throughout the home. Just brought, you know, with 3 units versus 1, now broadcasting that Wi-Fi signal that's covering the whole home. So I just wanted to share that real quick, just so people could get a visual of what this mesh Wi-Fi system is all about.
I feel like too, when you get, you know, for lack of a better term, internet installed, the router always ends up on the outside wall, like closest to the street, like closest away from anything where you actually want to use it, which probably puts you at an even further disadvantage, right? I mean,
Exactly. Where the Comcast modem router unit usually ends up in people's homes are 2 places. One, the easiest point where that Comcast technician can install it that day and move on to the next of his, like, you know, 9 scheduled jobs for the day.
a million things.
In it out and just get it in and move on to the next one. Or it ends up, you know, in the worst place in the house, actually, is a corner of a basement. Because all of your infrastructure, your incoming cable line, and your, you know, electrical service, it usually is all located down in the basement, in a corner of the basement. So a lot of times these, you know, your lifeline to your internet connection is installed, you know, in a corner of your basement in the worst possible place. So, you know, it's, and that's, you know, that's why we've seen so much success, especially here on the Cape, you know, and so much growth is that's really the challenge that people are facing. Not only is this unit their only point of Wi-Fi broadcast, but it's been installed, you know, like you said, either on one side of the house or in the basement, or just a place in the home where it's not doing its job, you know, efficiently at all.
Okay, great. So we don't have any more questions in the chat. Folks, if you have any questions, just a reminder, put something in the chat. Do you have anything else you wanted to discuss for Wi-Fi, or do you want to move on, maybe talk about like what are cool things that people are using once the Wi-Fi is set up in their home? Like what are the trends? What are some practical uses?
Yeah, I think if it's okay, Dale, I'll sort of jump back on your last question. You know, just about you know, maybe, you know, where this technology is going for Cape Codders, and and what we can see and expect to see in the next 5 years.
Okay, sure.
So, I think, really since high-speed internet's been around, we've only had, one choice here on the Cape, which is, and the islands actually, which is, just Comcast, because they have that broadband cable and infrastructure in place. But something that's kind of new and exciting is, and that we'll see a lot of in the next 5 years is the rollout of 5G towers. And if you have a iPhone 11 or any kind of newer smartphone, you may have seen your phone jump from LTE to 5G already, especially while you're traveling in places that aren't the Cape. So what the cell phone providers are doing, you have AT&T, you have T-Mobile, and you have Verizon. They are now offering in certain areas home internet service actually over their 5G cell tower network. And this hardware wise, the change is going to be you actually get your modem. They ship you out your modem, your little kit from your cell provider such as Verizon. And what you do is it's like a stick-on antenna. You stick it on the outside of your window, and then that wires back to your modem. And then whether you have just, another modem router unit for a smaller home, or you have, one of these mesh Wi-Fi systems for a larger home, it won't be too long before the Cape actually sees a real alternative to Comcast. And besides for that, we now also have Starlink, which is a satellite internet provider, which is, realistic speeds these days are still for Starlink around 97 megabits per second download, which really isn't that fast. But one of our technicians, Jonathan, was actually able to. We were doing some work at a Boston apartment about a month ago, and he ran a speed test that was 2,100 megabits per second out there. Which, to give you an idea, Comcast's highest, wired internet connection speed we've seen is 940. So you're really talking about something that actually has the potential, an internet connection that the potential the next 5 years, we may even see here on the Cape something that can go twice as fast as the current internet connections, just over the just over the the cellular broadcast, the 5G cellular broadcast. So I think that's kind of neat. There's a lot of people who've had their troubles with Comcast over the years and are looking for an alternative, and this alternative will actually be, most of them are a fixed price of about $50 a month. Some of them you have to be on that particular provider's cell phone plan as well, but that's less than what Comcast is offering for similar speeds. So I just find that is exciting. That we a change on the Cape.
I'm happy just to make a phone call right now when I leave the house. That's good for me. Like, I'm happy with that. So if we can get all these other things in the next 5 years, that's great. Although I don't know, 5G scares me a little bit. I don't want to disseminate any bad information, but anytime you hear about these new technologies, I just brace myself a little bit about what we maybe do or do not know about it. But yes, the prospect of being able to do things in everyday life is amazing. We can all agree on that. A couple more questions here. I guess there's a question, I don't know if we answered it specifically. Do you have a place, if someone has that diagram, their routers in one place, and they just need one additional access point, do you have a place where a trusted marketplace where you trust, if someone wants to try and go on this their own, that you could recommend to the group?
Um, you know, it's a great question. You know, I
I
would,
know this. I respect that this is your craft and your business,
right.
but you know, for the layman or the DIYer, is there like a place that someone can go and do something like this, or?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking to buy a mesh Wi-Fi system and give one a try, you know, Amazon's always great. They sell a bunch of different ones at the Best Buy in Hyannis.
Mhm.
You know, Google makes one. Arrow's another popular one. Um, you know, but the trick to it is, you know, there's, I want to come up with a good analogy. Okay, so you can, you know, you can do your, you know, you can do your own landscaping in your yard, and you can make it look really nice, you know, if you put the time and the effort into it.
Mhm.
Or you can hire like a high-end landscape architect, and they come in with a really good crew, and then they do it, you know, they draw you up a nice blueprint of what it's going to look like, and you know, with all this stonework and all of that. But I guess what I'm trying to say, and that might have been not the best analogy, but
No, it's
there's a
understandable. I understand
there's
that.
science to it. There's correctly configuring the Comcast router to work correctly with a mesh Wi-Fi system, and there's, you know, what we do as professionals. We, you know, also run all these speed tests, and when we go in there, we know, you know, how these units are speaking to each other and how the system is performing. So it's something you can kind of, and you know, these newer systems, they have apps that walk you through the setup, so it's relatively easy, you know, for a consumer to do this.
Mhm.
But there's just a lot of behind the scenes stuff to make it work its very best.
I understand.
And to,
It'll become a part-time job, right?
right, yeah. Yeah,
Just like the yard. Couple more questions here. We've got
sure.
about 10, 15 minutes left.
Yeah.
Elaine asked a question here. Just want to make sure I grab them all. Security or update concerns. And I think that means obviously security in a general, you're broadcasting. And then I'm guessing the update part of it is 6 months from now, these things, do they need some kind of regular maintenance to stay current?
Great question. That's another reason why we kind of are using these in this access point mode. You know, as far as security, you know, Comcast does have some good security embedded in their equipment already. So we, you know, as far as just, you know, somebody kind of hacking into your network, we sort of leave that on Comcast side, which is essentially what you started with. These, you know, besides for that, you know, realistically, you know, somebody still needs to know your Wi-Fi password to get on your network. So if you don't give that out, I mean, not to say that some, you know, qualified hacker can't get in there. I'm sure they can, you know, but you know, for real world security, you know, I can't just drive up and park in your driveway and get on your Wi-Fi without, you know, your actual Wi-Fi password that you put in, that you give to your guests, and that you know. And then what was the second part of that question?
Updates. So I'm
Update.
guessing that
Yeah.
means, when something comes out 6 months later, they find a vulnerability and it needs to update itself. I'm guessing that's
Right.
what that means. Obviously there must be concerns around that as well. This isn't like a set it, forget it type thing.
Right, and we're hoping that these systems have automatic updates soon that we can just enable and just, you know, make that you know, just you know, turn that feature on so they auto update. But essentially, you know, when we go back, because, you know, we don't only usually what happens is, you know, somebody will buy a Wi-Fi system for us. It'll work really well, and they'll be just floored by, like, oh my gosh, this actually works, and the Wi-Fi actually reaches where it goes and where they said you know, these guys said it would. Then they're like, hey, do you guys do TV installations? Can you update my sound system? Do you know, have you heard of Sonos? We have a friend who likes that, and so we do all of that stuff. So people usually call, or they're like, "Can you install a smart doorbell or some Wi-Fi cameras?" So people usually get back in touch with us about other things. And every time we visit a home, we update that Wi-Fi network, software for free. But it's not; those updates aren't necessarily. They're not really about security. There is some security stuff in there, new security protocols and stuff like that are pushed out every few years. But it's more so bugs, to fix bugs in the way that the system, kind of communicates with itself, or certain, other manufacturers' hardware that they find has issues with it, like maybe, some like a wireless printer, certain manufacturer model wireless printer isn't working that well with it. So they, that's part of the update to fix those bugs. Because when we go to update it, it shows us all the bugs or all the things that are being updated. And, rarely is it actual internet security stuff, because that's usually built into the hardware of the system, rather than the software.
Okay, that's good to know. 2 more questions here. We got about 10 more minutes. Robin from Cape Space asks, are there any special considerations for extending your Wi-Fi outdoors? So I'm guessing if you want to use it maybe in a cabana or out in your yard or something like that. Any weather related things that need to be thought about, I guess, or I don't know if you put these outside or if you want to keep them inside and push out, like how does that work?
Yeah, so there's a couple different options for doing that. The one nice thing is when you are trying to broadcast Wi-Fi signal outside, let's say you have a pool outside or a big outdoor
cameras, security cameras, I guess too, right?
Yep. Or a big outdoor living area. So usually if we just put one of these units, these mesh Wi-Fi units, on the exterior wall facing that outside area, usually then we're gonna see that unit broadcast between 100 and 200 feet out, which is usually enough to cover kind of a pool area. If we've got to get out to another guest house, as long as that, even if it's seasonal, like a pool cabana, we really don't see any hardware failures. Even if as long as it has power to plug in, we really don't see any hardware failures from just weather-related hardware failures from these units not being, even in a non-temperature regulated building. They really don't. We haven't seen any fail because of freezing temperatures. But we also have outdoor access points that can work with this system. So these units, this is where if you have like a boat dock and you like to spend time on your boat of your property, and you want to have your home Wi-Fi extend to your boat, so you can literally be out on the boat working and send a wireless and print something wireless to your printer in your office. We have these actual outdoor Wi-Fi access points that are actually built to be outdoors, and we installed a series of these in a cottage, little cottage community in Truro, and it's right on the ocean, right on the Atlantic. And these things, they've been working, great for the past 3 years, and they get some really serious weather blowing off the water. So, the equipment on a hardware level is there to really do whatever we want with it and broadcast wherever we want.
Okay, fantastic. Last question here in the chat as of right now. What Wi-Fi access points would you recommend? This is from Eldon. What Wi-Fi access points would you recommend for homes that don't need a mesh network?
Well, from seeing what the mesh network, well, let me back up. So to do access points all over your home, You need to have hard wiring in all of those locations. You know, and you can do what's called power over Ethernet, where you actually don't need a power outlet on the other end for these access points, because they actually get their power through the hardwired Ethernet line. You know, but the problem, the advantage to mesh Wi-Fi versus hardwired access points is those hard wires are only run to the locations that they're run in the home. Whereas if you are having an area of your home where you're struggling with Wi-Fi, you can also place, you know, one of these units, even if you have other units hardwired, you can place one of these units wirelessly as well to boost that signal to those locations in the home that don't have good Wi-Fi coverage. So basically, you're not limited to the locations of hard wiring in your home with these systems. So I'll answer his actual question in a minute, but I prefer doing mesh Wi-Fi because of that flexibility to get that Wi-Fi signal and that speed and performance everywhere we want, regardless if there's actual hard wiring at that location. So even when somebody asks me that question, I say still go with mesh Wi-Fi, because the locations that you do have hard wiring, you can use to get better speeds and performance out of those mesh Wi-Fi points. But the locations where that don't have hard wiring, you can still push that signal wirelessly through the same system. So it's just that from a flexibility standpoint, we always kind of try to go with mesh. But just getting back to your basic questions about access points in manufacturers, you know, for hardwired stuff, we kind of like the TP-Link brand equipment. It's you know, it's very cost effective. It's right there with performance as a lot of the other stuff, but it doesn't have as much of the price tag. It's reliable. If you're looking to go real high end, Cisco Meraki is the next, you know, if you have the budget, that's a really good quality you know, hardwired network equipment line.
Okay, great. We've got one more question that came in. We're running up against the hour, but I think Eldon's question is, what Wi-Fi access points would you recommend? I think what he's saying is, let's say my router's in the basement, but my home office is, I only care about, okay, my router's right next to my TV, awesome, but my office is up in my spare bedroom or my bedroom. I only care about it there. I don't care about walking around. I just need it in that one spot. How do I get from A to B Wi-Fi wise? Do you still recommend a mesh at the point of the router and in that room? Or is there a simple way you can just kind of boost that signal to that room? I think that's what he's asking.
Yeah. It's a tough one because
don't worry, we're not going to ask you to warranty your answer.
It's just like I'm in the business of giving people great Wi-Fi coverage everywhere in their home. So, you know, and I get that question a lot. Like, well,
someone's got your arm behind your back twisted and you have to answer. What do you say?
One location. But, you know, for me, it's like, you know, if I do that type of work, if I only get it in one location of the home, you know, then somebody else in the family is like, I thought the Osterville Wi-Fi guys were here and they were here to improve the Wi-Fi. And now we still don't get it here, and here. You know,
we understand that.
Bad for my reputation. I have to make sure that you know, we deliver that excellent coverage everywhere. So, but to that point,
Can you use like a booster? Can you go to Best Buy and get a booster, or is that not recommended? Let's start with that question.
At what's called a mesh Wi-Fi extender, Netgear makes one. I really don't recommend them, and that's you know, whoever would like to, please give me a call and I can dive in deeper. But you know, I don't want to, you know, take the, you know, it's at the heart of it, it's really the way these things hand off to each other, you know, and you can be standing, you know, with Wi-Fi extenders, you can be standing next to this point, this other point of Wi-Fi broadcast for up to 15 minutes right next to it with your device before the device actually says, hey, there's something stronger that I can connect to here. Whereas if you have one of these mesh Wi-Fi systems with seamless roaming, it's just quick point to point to point to point. It's like just like being at an airport where you have, you know, connectivity everywhere you're walking. So it's I would.
Understood. It's like a unicycle versus a bicycle, right? There's a
Yeah,
better way. There's a better way to get around. We can put that one to rest because we have two more
right.
questions and 1 minute left.
Yeah,
Michael Kemp asks, is there a tool or an app to see what kind of demand or a load there is? So I'm in my house and my daughter's got 3 things going and my son's playing Xbox. Is there a way, is there something that can capture how much bandwidth we're actually using, or what, you know, I guess the size up for demand, you know, through the Wi-Fi? Not obviously the bottleneck could be the router itself, but within the home, I mean, I think he means.
Yeah, it's you know, Wi-Fi. There's a tool. It doesn't work for iPhone, but Android devices and PCs, you can, you know, and Chromebooks, you can download. It's called Wi-Fi Analyzer, and that will give you a lot of you know, kind of the behind the scenes measurement. Probably too much information, you know, to measure that. From me, I usually ask people when they call, you know, how do you use the Wi-Fi in your home? Do you have, you know, teenagers? Do you have kids? Do you work from home? You know, all of these things, you know, kind of translate, and, you know, what the demand is going to be on that network, and also how much speed they should have incoming from their provider, or their what's called their speed tier, in this case from Comcast. So, you know, and we, you know, when we go out there and we do these jobs, you know, if somebody's only got on an old plan and they've only got 100 megabits per second coming in, or 200 megabits per second, we usually advise those people, we help them through it to get them up to something that's 400 or 600 megabits per second, especially if they're doing a lot of streaming. You know, if they don't have cable boxes everywhere, if they're doing a lot of streaming, they have a kid who's into video games, they do multiple Zoom calls at the same time in the home. So there's a lot of different factors, and that's where, you know, someone like myself coming in can, you know, get a bigger picture of all of that, and then, you know, get the Wi-Fi where it needs to be for the actual practical applications of that home, especially if it's a rental, you know, and you've got, you know, you had 3 people in the house, you know, year round, but now in the summer, you know, there's 10 people in that house, or 15. You know, it's you know, you need to plan for the kind of the sort of maximum usage of that Wi-Fi.
Gotcha. So that's a great place to end. We're up against time here. If anyone else has additional questions, I'm sure there's a bunch. I've got a bunch. They can reach out to you directly. It's Officerville Wi-Fi and Smart Home.
Yeah.
There's a link also on our website, and I will turn it. Thank you very much. That was great. A lot of great questions. I didn't realize there was so much more to this. I'm a technology guy, and I just like turn it on and expect to work. So this is really exciting to kind of get a little bit.
That's what we're in the business of doing, you know. I just want it to work. I get that phrase more than anything else from the customers.